Hi everyone, today we are going to see Introduction to Information Technology. In Information Technology, we are going to see the topic called Disaster Management in this class. Disaster Management is nothing but the calamity which happened in our area, or anything which happened nearby our area will be called as a disaster, right? The word disaster we are familiar with: earthquakes, tsunami, or a kind of flood. Likewise, we have heard before. But in disaster management, in Introduction to Information Technology, we are going to see what are the disasters which are going to happen in the organization. If we say in our organization, if there is any disaster happens, what we think, like, it is not only like floods or earthquakes or any other fire problems, but it can be done through humans. When humans do mistakes, it will also comes under disaster management. So people need to be aware what disaster management is and what people are doing in disaster management. Here comes the definition of disaster management. Disaster management is how we deal with the human, material, economic or environmental impacts of said disaster. It is the process of how we prepare for, respond to and learn from the effects of major failures. Though often caused by nature, disasters can have human origins, like I previously said in the previous slide. The human origins are the major issues in the recent disaster management process, because many of the problems have occurred because of the human negligence, I say, because many of the people don't know what they were doing in that organization. By mistake or by intention, they do that mistakes and it will become a disaster in some other way. When we say, like, if the data from our one company is transferred to another company, it will also comes under the disaster, right? Because I will save some of the important data in my system, but if any of my employee or if any of the person from my organization send that information to another person who is working in a competitor company, there is so many chances they can steal our data, right? So disaster management is the one which we need to be more vigilant, because in disaster there will be n number of disasters, right? Not only like disasters comes through earthquake, flood or any other fire problems, but it can also through humans. You need to understand that first. Following other things one should consider to avoid the disasters. What we're going to do is we need to prepare a detailed inventory of all the equipments, especially computer and communication component, and make sure you keep it all with an up to date. The inventory should cover all the hardware, software, communication equipments, peripherals, backup media and power conditioned equipments, because if there is any disaster going to happen, we are not aware, right? It can happen anytime, so we need to be prepared for anything. So we need to have our systems and the communication components up to date. If we have that in up to date, so we can recover our data easily, so that there will be no problems while we doing our process. So we need to be aware of how we need to take the backups in our system, because every day we need to take the backup. If we consider a WhatsApp, I guess you are using a WhatsApp, right? If we see there is an backup option in the WhatsApp itself, even in a WhatsApp we are having a backup option. So if we work in a bigger organization, the bigger organization should take backup for every data we are working. So we need to have backups for every work we are doing in our system, or anything which are related to the organization. That's what this slide says. When we say about the inventory, the inventory should have the model and serial number of the computers and how much quantities we are having in our work area, and who are the vendors and the suppliers who are supplying the products. And we need to have the alternate vendors too, because if there is any problem with a vendor, if he cannot supply the orders if we are looking for, then we need to go for an alternate vendor, right? So in case of disaster, we need to have a backup plan, so that we need to have a vendor plus an alternate vendor, and we need to check the availability of the vendor also, and also we need to check the risk manager when assessing the insurance need for equipment, software, and the data. The next topic which you are going to see is business continuity planning. Many of the students would have gone across the word BCP in IT companies. If you have any of your brother or sister who is working in an IT organization, they would have told the word called BCP. BCP is nothing but an alternate plan for our work area. If there is any disaster happening in our work area, there will be a option called BCP. We can go work there and we can do our complete our task there. So that is called as BCP. The definition of BCP is the business continuity plan is a document that consists of a critical information of an organization needs to continue operating during an unplanned event. The BCP states the essential function of the business, identifies which systems and process must be sustained, and details how to maintain them. Likewise, if there is any disasters happened, and if there is any unplanned event, like if there is any disaster in the sense of earthquake or a flood or any other tsunami, like any event happen, we need to have a backup plan, right? In that time we need to have the area which we going to work. If we consider if the flood is coming in our college area, what we going to do? We can have a classes online, right? There is an option called online for us. But if there is in a workspace, if there is anything happen in your workspace area, what we going to do? The process should not stop. So that is an option we should have for a BCP. The BCP should have the proper plan what we are going to do if there is any unplanned event. That's what called as BCP. Here comes the guidelines of BCP process. The employee should be aware what is BCP is, and we need to have a fire detection prevention in that area, and we need to have the hard copy records in the BCP location, and we should have the human factor personal consideration, because in our work area we will have that human factor consideration. So, but in the area of BCP we should also consider the human factors there also, and we need to have a local area networks which should be available every time, and we need to have media handling and the storage point, and we need to have the miscellaneous considerations in the BCP process. Now we are going to see the disaster recovery planning. We are seeing about the disaster management, right? If we consider the disaster happens, we need to have the disaster recovery plan, right? Because if disaster happens, whatever happens, we need to have a backup plan. Like if there is any issue with your job, we need to have a backup plan. Likewise, if there is any disaster, we need to have a backup plan, right? If there is a disaster occurs, so we need to have the recovery plans. Now only we going to see is the disaster recovery planning. In disaster recovery plan, disaster happen in all forms, like in accidental or deliberate or natural and the man-made. While it may not be practical to protect against all possibilities, an effective disaster recovery plan protects against the two most likely data disasters, like human error and equipment failure. As I said before, the human error can be saved. Like if we have the proper disaster recovery plan, we can eliminate the human error. Let us consider a person who works in an organization is not satisfied with the company's pay or the company manager's guidance or anything else. So if the employee is unsatisfied, he has high capability to transfer the data to another person, or else he might be do some mistakes in the process and he can make some human errors. In order to avoid that, we need to have a proper plan. In a proper plan, in the sense, if the person is sending an email to one person, there is an option to stop. If we send a message to another person, it can be stopped. Likewise, we can stop in the many ways. The human errors can be reduced in the many of the options. Another one is an equipment failure. If there is an equipment failure like disk drive crash, transient power failures, we cannot do with this errors. So what we can do is we can get a proper backup every day. If we have a proper backup every day, the equipment failure won't affect the organization in any way. So the equipment failure is not happens in the regularly, or it is not done because of the human errors. If there is a more data involved, there might be chances to get the disk drive crash, or if there is any power failure, that there is an option for a system crash. So we need to be more vigilant, and we need to be more conscious in the taking the data backup. So the key to effective disaster recovery is the creation and protection of backup data sets. Like I said, we need to take a backup for every data we are working. In case of human error, we cannot do. We need to protect the data through various privacy settings. If we have any privacy settings in our system, there is no possibility of transferring the data or doing any malpractices or doing any human errors. If we have two-way authentication, there won't be any issue with the human error. But when it comes to equipment failure, we need to be more cautious, and we need to be more vigilant and taking the backup for every work we are doing. That's what we are going to say in the disaster recovery plan. Here comes the last slide. As we discussed about backups in the previous slide, so the backup need to be more vigilant and need to be more cautious, and it is the important one in the disaster management. So in case of backup, we need to have the proper time, and we need to have the proper employability to take the backup of the data of the system. So we need to plan the time and resources to back up the data completely. In WhatsApp, we are having an option to back up the data at what time we require. Most of the people will do the backup at the midnight time, so the data will be backup, the backup data will be fully gathered. Likewise, in an organization, we need to take the backup at the time which is required. So we need to plan for the time which we need to do the backup, and we need to have the resources. Like if people go for home, and who will take the backup, we need to have the proper resources to take the backup. So we need to plan it accordingly, and we need to have consistent backup schedule and a criteria. We need to have a schedule. If there is, if let us consider, if you're going to take a backup daily, and means we need to know what time the backup is going to happen, or else if we're going to do a backup in every weekend, so we need to plan that accordingly, so that we need to have a consistent backup schedules, and we need to have to store the backup copies offsite. The word offsite has comes now, and if the what is offsite means, the place which we are not working, the place we are working is called as an on-site, and if the place which we are going outside the organization, it will be called as an off-site. So we need to store the backups both in on-site and on off-site. It will help for the organization if there is any disaster happens in the on-site location. If there is any disaster happens in an on-site location, we can grab the data from the off-site location also. So the backup basics are more important in the disaster management. And let us come to the conclusion of the disaster management. So we come across the disaster management, and what are the disasters, how are the disasters happening, and what are the disaster recovery plan we need to have, and how to do the backups. Likewise, we have seen in the previous slides. So I guess you are a little bit aware about what the disaster management is, right? So in the disaster management, we are having n number of process, and we in this slide we just saw about what are the basic or simple disasters which are happening. We are having a more disaster. What else I can say is if virus stuck in your system, it is also one of the disasters. Like there are several viruses you have heard about, like Trojan is a word which is a malware, spyware. This is all one of the viruses which affects the system. If the virus affects the system, what we are going to do, our data is gonna lost. So this is also one of the disasters. So we need to have the recovery plan for all of the disasters which is happening in the computers. Why we are doing this, all this is because our work is basically depends on the computers, right? Most of us are depending upon the computers to do our daily tasks. So we need to have a disaster management. So this is the main goal of the several organizations to save their data. So several organizations have concentrating on the disaster management to acquire their data, or no, save their data from the outside world. So they are using the disaster management more cautiously, and people who are going to study the disaster management should know what is the disaster management is, and how the organization is saving their data from the disasters. So people can study in many ways. The people should have that interest in studying the disaster management. It is an easy topic and it will be lively topic, so people need to be more people should make it interesting to study, because they can, if they should consider it as a real life event. Let us take your system. You are everyone will have their own system or a mobile phone or a laptop, whatever it is. So if let us consider, if your mobile phone is having some virus or it got stolen from any of the persons, what we are going to do? We are having a backup plan, right? We will be having a find my phone or find my computer, whatever option we are having, we will search for our computer, and if there is any data loss, we can, what we will do, we will go for a backup center and they will give the backup of your file, and we need to pay for certain amount. This is what we are doing in the real life. Likewise, the same process which is happening in an organization. In an organization, if there is n number of people working, so they need to have a disaster management. They can have a disaster management team or disaster management employee who can have a control of the organization, right? So they can do the disaster management plan. So if in your locality, you might come from different localities, right? In your locality there might be several companies in your locality, so you can visit any of the company. You can ask the manager to tell about what are the disaster management plans they were having, and is there any disaster happened before. Then you can get a simple idea what happened in the organization. If we go and visit an organization, you can clearly understand what are the disasters which can occur and what are the disaster recovery plans they are having. So it will help you for the future endeavors. So be prepared, and if you start an organization, or if you're going to be an entrepreneur also, it is going to help you. If you're going to start a business, and if you have a systems, and if you have an employees, we need to have a disaster recovery plans. There is a possibility of the data getting stolen, or the data getting up failures, like equipment failures, whatever may happen in the future. So we need to prepare for everything, and we need to have the proper backups for the every data we are working. That's it. Thanks for listening to the class. Have a nice day.